The path to mastery leads through the heart of adversity. Challenge is the raw material from which courage and strength are forged. Warriors are not defined by events. Warriors define them. Warriors conquer themselves before all else. Warriors are relentless in their service to others. Join us as we open our hearts and hone our minds to a razor's edge. It doesn't matter how slow you go, only that you do not stop. Your time is now. And now your host, Jason McKenzie.
Hello, everybody. It is 6:04 in the morning, so I have definitely my husky morning voice on. And let me give you a little inside baseball here about how this works, because it always amazes me how little equipment you actually need to do a podcast. So my kids are having a sleepover in our basement. They tend to do that on Friday nights. So despite the fact that they claim they don't like each other, sometimes they do love hanging around with each other. So they're downstairs in the basement where my microphone and headphones are. So I just snuck down there, super quiet, and grab my stuff. And for some reason, they have the basement window open, and it is freaking freezing down there. So anyways, regardless, I'm sitting at my dining room table in a creaky chair. So if you hear that, just bear with me. But anywho, that is how I do my mobile publishing studio. It's very exciting. And so is this conversation, actually. So I talked to Jeff Huxford, Huxford, and Jeff is a medical doctor who suffered a traumatic brain injury while getting basically broadsided by a truck in his car. And what an interesting story, because it makes it, what we talk about in the story is much about the actual experience of getting a brain injury and what that was like to try to recover from, but also just dealing with a profoundly significant event and, having a life that was forever altered and what that would look like. And just a great guy. And he's got a really interesting story. And I don't know, I just really like the way he tells it. And I think what's important about it is that, as I've experienced in my own life, and certainly many people have experienced in their own, God, you never know what's around the next corner. You never know when your life will be inexorably altered. And how would you handle that? Like when I was I remember I used to think about this quite frequently when Cindy was sick, I don't know what happened here. I don't know how I'm going to get my life back. I don't know how to live this new life. I don't know what to do. And it's a profoundly unsettling feeling, because it's like you're not anchored anymore. And you go from having this sense of what your life is supposed to be and a sense of structure to having that, a lot of it or all of it even taken away, and then trying to navigate your way through this, what feels like unorganized chaos. And Jeff does a really great job of telling this story and taking us through what it was like. And his own, one thing I found really interesting was talking about his own sense of self, like after the brain injury, and how much he was actually aware of that he had changed, and the symptoms that he was suffering. And because I think that's another really interesting thing to think about is, how our own sense of self-awareness, brain injury or not, is different from what other people experience. And it doesn't make it right or wrong. It just makes it different. And I know, again, for myself and my own personal experience, I had some very large periods of my life, like most of it, where my sense of self-awareness was, I would say, quite limited. And I had very little understanding of how I was appearing and showing up in the world, other than the stories I was telling myself. And while that's true for all of us, I'm much more open now to being able to understand and to receive, or to think differently, I guess, about how I'm showing up and the perception that I'm creating and the interactions and the ripple effects that I'm causing. So, Jeff talks about during his recovery, that he was a very different person who had suffered a traumatic injury, and how he wasn't really aware of, how he was different, I guess. So it's an amazing story. And it's also a story about release in a way, because he had to give up something that he loved so much and had worked so hard for, which is becoming a medical doctor. And he talks us through what that was like and what he's doing now and how he's trying to transition from that. Amazing guy. He's written a book. I really think it would be good for you to read, because it really is one of those fundamental questions that we either will be forced to grapple with or that we think about sometimes, which is, what would I do? How would I handle something happening that changed my life in a significant way, maybe forever? Right. So I hope you enjoy this conversation. I know I certainly did. And I probably say that with every podcast episode, but that's because I enjoy every single conversation I do on the podcast. So enjoy the episode. Thanks, Jeff, for coming on, man. And thank you for continuing to push through the incredible adversity that you've been through, because the world needs men like you. And I wish you all the best, my brother. Take care. And we will see you on the other side of this episode. Hey, Jeff, welcome to the Mental Health Warriors podcast.
Thanks for having me. This is awesome. I appreciate it.
Yeah. So how did we connect again? You reached out to me. Was it through a mutual friend?
It was. So what happened was I go down to this coffee shop in my neighborhood, and I work on my blog. I'm working on my book and stuff down there. And I would see this girl down there every day. I'd see this girl every day. So finally I introduced myself to her, and her name is Aspen. And so I think Aspen was on your podcast.
Oh, she's going to be. Yeah.
She's going to be. Okay. So anyway, she was telling me about your podcast, and I was telling her my story, and she goes, "You really should reach out to Jason with Mental Health Warriors. I think you would like your story and would like to talk to you about it." So that's why I reached out to you, because Aspen recommended it. So.
Oh, well, there you go. Well, here we are.
There you go. Yep.
Yeah. So I mean, I know a little bit about you, but why don't you give us your backstory? And I know you're a doctor, for example. So
Correct.
Why don't you take us back and take us through that? I'm really curious to know. Actually, it's funny. This is funny because I was just talking to my daughter upstairs, and she's in grade 9, and they're already putting this pressure. Like, they get this pressure really early, to try to decide.
Isn't that crazy? That's so crazy. That's so crazy to me.
Nuts.
Yeah.
But one of the things she was saying was, yeah, well, if you want to be a doctor, for example, you need to, blah, blah, blah. And I was saying, well, I suspect that most people who are doctors probably know that at a relatively young age, because obviously that's one of the things where you got to kind of decide that early. So how did you, this will be good information for me, but when did you decide you wanted to be a doctor, and why did you decide you wanted to be one?
Yeah, right. So people ask me that all the time, and I wish I remembered exactly when it was. And I can't remember exactly when that was, but I think what happened was, I think I remember my brother having an injury. He was 7 years older than me. He's playing basketball, and he had some sort of injury that required him to go to see some sports medicine doctors. And I remember going to that appointment and thinking, this would be a cool job to have. I want to be a sports medicine doctor. So I think that's when I had my first when I first got interested in doing medicine. But when I first started, it was I want to be a sports medicine doctor. So that's not what I ended up doing. And I think that was sometime when I was in maybe junior high, maybe late. I don't remember. I think junior high. So that's my guess. But I don't remember exactly why that was. But I remember I liked sports, and I thought it'd be cool to be a doctor and incorporate, do something with sports in my whole life. And so I want to be a sports medicine doctor.
And what were some of the personal characteristics or strengths that you had that would be really applicable to being a doctor or a good doctor?
That's a good question. I mean, I think you have to be pretty good with people. So that was something you do see. I guess you see physicians out there that are not people are not good with people. But I think I had pretty good people skills, and that was something that was one of my strengths. I made pretty good grades. I knew that to be a doctor, it would take a lot of education, and in order to get into med school, you had to make good grades in college. So that was another strength I had, and I think the combination of those two things, just the grades and the you don't do it educationally, getting through it that way, and then and just the people skills. The generic answer for being a doctor is you want to do it to help people, but that's that was probably the case. But I think anybody could say that about anything, really. But yeah, sure. It's kind of a generic answer. But I think that was part of it too. I wanted to be able to make a difference in people's lives, and in that way.
So, how much of your education and getting through that was natural intelligence versus exceptional practices?
I would say, high school for me was pretty easy. I went to a small high school, and I don't remember studying much in high school. I got through that pretty easy. But I went to college, I had to study a lot more. So I mean, I think I had some baseline intelligence, but you had to put the work in too to study, because I knew if I wanted to be in med school, I had to make good grades, because if I just coasted through college and barely made it through, the chance of me getting into med school is pretty low. So when I made really good grades in college, and I got accepted into med school right out of college. And then during med school, that's another 4 years. I think I was at best an average student. There were some really smart people in my class, and I was at best an average student. And I remember somebody telling me this when I first started. And you might have heard this before, but the old joke is, what do you call the person that graduates last in his or her med school class? And the answer is doctor. So yeah. So yeah, I was probably average student in med school, and I think a lot of people have a hard time adjusting to that, because they're used to being at the top of the class and getting really good grades. But I think I adjusted to that fairly well.
Oh, that's interesting. I hadn't really thought about that. So this is more of my own curiosity, because I have no idea about this world, but what kind of opportunities, like what are the different opportunities available to, say, like the average student in medical school versus the exception?
Well, that's a good question. I think if you want to be like a one of the tougher fields to get in, it's all about what residency you can get into. So in order to get into a residency, like, I don't know this for certain, but I'm thinking in order to be like a dermatologist, or to be a maybe some sort of specialty surgeon, or orthopedics, maybe radiology, pathology. Those are all tough fields to get into. So if you want to get into those residencies, you got to kind of be towards the top of your class. I chose family medicine, which is not one of those. That's not one of those residencies that requires you to be at the top of the class. But that's what I wanted to do anyway. So it didn't. The fact that I was an average student did not hurt me there, because that's what I wanted to do anyway.
Oh, that's really interesting.
Yeah.
So, okay. So you graduate medical school, and I mean, where does the story take a, terrible twist?
All right. Yeah. So yeah, out of medical school, that was, let's see, I graduated medical school in 2000 and, let me think, 99. Okay, 99 I graduated medical school. Nope, let me back it up. College, 99. Med school, 2003. And so I went, I wanted to be a family medicine doctor, and so I chose a family practice residency, and I moved down. Me and my wife got married right out of med school. We moved down to Tennessee, and I did the 3 years there, and then we moved back to her hometown in Northwest Indiana, and that's where I started my career as a family medicine, like private practice. And so, at this point, it's 2000 and I'm losing track of years here. 2006 is when I moved back to Indiana to start my career, I guess you'd say. And my career was going well. I mean, I really liked my job. I was practicing medicine in a small town, very similar to the one I grew up in. It was kind of what I pictured doing the rest of my life. And this is what I did up until 2012, and that's when kind of things took a turn. If we're getting real details, I guess I worked 4 days a week. Thursday was my day off, and it was my day. So it was on a Thursday, and I ran into town to run a few errands. And on the way back to my house, that's when my life changed. I mean, I came up to a pretty busy 4-way stop, the flashing red light, I guess you could say like highways intersected. The flashing red lights are very noticeable. It wasn't like it doesn't sneak up on you. But I don't remember this happening. This is all hearsay. But I'd stopped at the light. I was proceeding through there in a car, and a work truck didn't stop and hit me on the passenger side and ran me into a concrete pole. And my head went through so it hit me on the passenger side. My head went through the driver's side window and struck this concrete pole, and I had to be cut out of my truck. My truck was basically wrapped around the pole, and had to be cut out of the truck and they transported me across the road to a field where a helicopter could pick me up, and a helicopter transported me to Chicago, up to a big hospital up there, and they went to the ER, and they had to figure out what was all wrong with me. And after kind of going head to toe on me, X-rays and examinations, they figured out I had a traumatic brain injury. And with the kind of traumatic brain injury I had, I didn't require surgery, because I was fortunate for that. But it was basically a waiting game. They didn't know, based on my injuries, how much I would get back and whether I'd get better and what was going to happen. So for the next few weeks, it was just a waiting game to see if I got better or not.
So what constitutes a traumatic brain injury?
Well, I think traumatic brain injury is kind of a catch-all term. So in one way, you could say somebody that has like a stroke, that's considered a traumatic brain injury. Or if somebody has like some sort of bleed in the brain, that would be a traumatic brain injury. So I guess a concussion technically is a traumatic brain injury. That's a very minor, but you think concussion, that's not that big of a deal, but a concussion is a serious thing. It's a traumatic brain injury. And my traumatic brain injury, they use the terms, kind of fancy terms. I'd never heard of these terms before my injury, but one of the things they called mine was a diffuse axonal injury. And what diffuse axonal injury means is basically like all the neurons and all the nerve fibers that connect in your brain. A lot of those were just torn and disconnected. And when that happens, like your brain releases more chemicals, and that causes even more damage. So they use that term. The other term they used to describe my brain injury was something called brain shearing, which basically is the same thing. Like the tiny nerves were all just like torn apart.
Those are two words you don't really want to put together.
Right. So yes. So when this is all going on, my family and my wife are hearing these terms, brain shearing and diffuse axonal injury. And my wife kind of decided from the start, like, she's not going to go home and Google those terms. Like, she doesn't want to know, because you're always going to hear the worst possible scenario when you look it up. But I think some of my other family members, they looked them up, and if you look those things up if you Google those terms, it's not good. I mean, You would not think that I would be talking to you on this podcast right now if you knew I had those injuries. So right. The fact that I'm doing this is, it's a miracle.
Yeah, no kidding. So you said you were basically a waiting game for a couple of weeks. And so are you in some kind of, I guess you're in some kind of coma at this point, or are you awake?
Yeah. I don't remember what was going on. So for the first couple of days, I think you'd probably say I was in a coma. But for the next, I would say the first hospital I was in, I was there a week. I don't remember that at all. So then I got transferred to this rehab hospital in downtown Chicago. And for the first week and a half there, I don't recall that either. I think I was doing some things. Like, for instance, my wife would say, like, she would say, "Who am I?" And I would say, like, "Wife," or something, but I wasn't communicating much. Actually, the first thing I recall was being at this hospital. It was I don't know how many stories there was. I think I was like on the 10th floor of this hospital, and it overlooked Lake Michigan, right on Lakeshore Drive. And I remember looking out the window of my room, and I was thinking to myself, like, I'm on a vacation right now, and I'm looking out the ocean. Like, where am I at? So, when in all actuality, I was in this hospital room, and I was overlooking Lake Michigan. That's actually, I think, the first memory I can recall of being in the hospital. They call this period after an accident, after a brain injury, they call it, I'm blanking on the term right now. My memory sucks, but let me think of this. This is important. Okay. It's called post-traumatic amnesia. So, okay. Or PTA for short. So they have this, that's a term they use when describing a brain injury. So they determine like post-traumatic amnesia. So if anything that lasts longer than 24 hours, if your post-traumatic amnesia lasts more than 24 hours, which basically means like after an injury, you don't know who you are, where you are, what's going on. That's called post-traumatic amnesia. So if it lasts more than 24 hours, that's considered a severe traumatic brain injury. And my PTA lasted, heck, I don't know, like close to 2 weeks. So for 2 weeks, I didn't know what the heck was going on. They would run this test on me every day, and I can't remember what it was called. They called it a GOAT test, I think. That was an acronym for something. So they ran this GOAT test, and based on that, they would decide: am I out? Have I come out of that state yet? And they would ask questions like, "What's your name? Where are you?" I think they had you write down some things, or just basically see if your mind was functioning. And that took me a while to come out of that, where I passed that test. And I remember doing that when I was in the hospital. But yeah, so I was in the hospital, if you count the first hospital, like a total of a month. And I really only recall like the last week, roughly. Yeah.
Wow. Hey, so it sounds like there's something slamming or banging behind you.
It might be the table or something. This mic is so sensitive. I'm not used to. Yeah, maybe I'll yeah. Okay, I'll. Yeah.
Okay. So your first memory is you said looking out the window. Like, what is your like? I don't know how to exactly ask this, but like, how aware are you of how badly injured?
Not at all. I think that I thought, I think I figured that I had an injury, but when you hear about it, I knew I had a brain injury, pretty early on. But when I think about a brain injury, I think like, okay, I had a concussion, and you see people have concussions all the time, and people who play sports have a concussion, and they're back within a week, and they're playing their sports. They get better. I don't think I realized how bad my concussion or how bad my brain injury was. So I don't think my awareness of how serious it was didn't hit me for quite a while.
Are you aware of your own impaired like cognitive ability at that point, or do you feel like you're normal?
I can't recall exactly. I think I knew something was wrong with me, but But again, I thought like, okay, this is temporary. This is going to get better. And, I tell people like my whole life, I figured, with hard work and determination, you can overcome whatever and get what you want. I guess I assumed the same thing with this brain injury. It was a setback, but I would be able to work hard enough and put the work in and the time in, and I'd get back to where I was before.
Okay, so what does it look like then? So now you're in the, like, how long are you in the hospital? It must have been a freaking long time.
It was a lot shorter. I was only in the hospital actually a month. So what happened was these doctors started talking to my wife about, I wasn't getting better for a few weeks, and they're saying with injuries like this, it's going to require like months of therapy, maybe even years of therapy. So you're going to need to start looking at a long-term rehab facility. So she was looking, like the closest one was like 6 hours away from the house, from our home. So she's like, how the heck am I going to handle this? So the doctor was like preparing her for that, and she was thinking about all the options. And the day that the doctor was going to come in and like talk to us, like, okay, you got to make a decision. What are you going to do? It was like something clicked overnight, and I kind of woke up, and I wasn't back to normal, but something had happened, and I was doing so much better, and I was able to communicate, and I was so much more functional. And the doctor's like, you know what? I think you better take him home. He'll need to do some therapy outpatient, but I think here in a couple weeks he'll be able to go home with this. So after a month, I got to go home. And that's when I started doing some outpatient therapy and all that stuff.
So what kind of therapy would you do?
So usually with a brain injury, it's like you do three things. You do physical therapy, you do occupational therapy, and you do speech therapy. So when I got out of the hospital, I went to this rehab. I went to this outpatient rehab center, and they evaluated me for all three of those. And actually, they didn't think I would need any. They didn't need any occupational therapy. So physical therapy, I only did like another month of that out of the hospital. It was more like working on my balance, and because my balance is off, it's still not great, but my balance is really bad. So they worked on that, and with me just laying around the hospital for a few weeks. I got pretty weak, so they decided to strengthen my legs and all that. So I did that for like a week, but really the main thing I needed was speech therapy. Given the fact that my goal was to go back to work as a doctor, I had to do a lot of speech therapy, and they targeted that at what they call executive level functioning, because if I wanted to go back and work as a doctor, I'd have to be able to make decisions and decide on what medicines to prescribe and figure out what's wrong with my patient, figure out what's wrong with this patient that's coming in to see me. So I did a lot of speech therapy with executive level functioning. In addition, just to the, I don't think my speech, as far as my enunciation and stuff, was ever off. But I had a hard time thinking of words. If I was trying to tell somebody, when I went back to work, if I was trying to tell somebody, well, I'll say this: I thought my speech was fine, and in fact, the speech therapist before I went back to work said, "Oh, you're good. I don't think you need any more." But when I went back to work and I started working again, I could tell I needed some more, because I would know what was wrong with somebody, but when I was trying to explain to them what was wrong with them and what I was going to do for them, I had a really hard time explaining, like finding the right words and being able to describe to them what was going on. So when that happened, I had to go back and get some more therapy.
How frustrating was that?
It was very frustrating, because I knew exactly what I wanted to tell them, and but I just couldn't get it out. So it was very frustrating when something was so like second nature before. It was so simple for you to do, and then when you're, you got this plan for them, you're going to tell them what medicine you're going to prescribe and what it's going to do for them, and you're trying to get it out, and you just can't find the words to explain to them. It got very frustrating. And here's the thing too: when I was doing that and I got frustrated, that only made it worse. So the more frustrated I got, the harder it was for me to explain. It was kind of a vicious cycle there.
Yeah, no kidding. So how were you? I mean, how long were you from the accident till you went back to work? And was it considered like miraculous?
It was much quicker than. I mean, they went from thinking I would need like months to years of inpatient therapy to going home after a month, and I was back to work in 5 months. Now, when I went back to work, I wasn't back to anywhere near where I was before. I started out just working like maybe a couple half days a week, and the doctors I work with they looked at my charts to make sure I was doing the right thing and making good decisions. So they would do that. So that I did that. When I started out, I had to do that. It wasn't like going back in full force. And I never got back to the same level I was before. Like I was never seeing as many patients as I had in the past, and I never got back. I tried as hard as I could, but I just couldn't get back up there.
So how did it change you as a person? Did it change your personality at all?
Oh yeah, big time. I guess I'll try to explain it, but my wife could tell you this even better than me, but I think I became a much more, I used to be like an extrovert. I would, always joking around, and, I wouldn't, because I was on life at the party, but I was like involved, and I became much more introverted, and I would just kind of sit there and watch watch what was going on. I would talk once in a while, but I was much more introverted. I think I became a much more serious person. I guess that goes along with being introverted. I just had to, I don't know, my perspective on things changed. Like things that were important before, or things I liked before, that like they did not interest me anymore. So, in that way, I guess like hobbies and just my interest changed, which for a while was hard for me to accept. I think I tried to deny those things. I just tried to go back to being who I was before, because that's when people look at me, they don't see any. I have no scars to show them that I was injured. So people look at me and they think, "Oh, he looks fine. He's back to normal." And so I think that's what I wanted to give them. I just wanted to show, like, you're right. I want to show you I am normal, but I knew I wasn't. And like I tried for the longest time to to get back to who I was before and how I was before, and it just never happened.
Did you, I can imagine what it must have felt like to be this newly introverted person wanting so friggin' much to be the extrovert you once were. That must have been incredibly frustrating as hell.
Right. The kind of the interesting thing too is that my wife is an introvert, big time introvert, and I was always the extrovert. So it was almost like we switched roles. Like she never became an outright extrovert, but I think she became a lot more extroverted than she was, and I, on the other hand, went from extrovert. It was like a role reversal. So that was a tough thing for me to accept. I mean,
wow, yeah, no kidding. Did you have any issues with I don't know, like your own sense of masculinity, for example, like not being able to, like, super competitive guy going through medical school, you can't take on the workload. Like, I'm sure your wife has taken way more care of you than she ever was.
Yep. Oh yeah, yeah, for sure. I mean, I struggled with like not being the same husband I was. I don't think I was able to. I had a real hard time, and I still do have a hard time like making decisions. Like I just have a hard time deciding on things. It just stresses me out. Mm-hmm. So a lot of times I just say like, Jack, you decide. And same thing with my kids. Like being as a father, I have a son that'll be in sixth grade. He'll be a seventh grader. He's 12. My daughter will be a sixth grader. She's 11 or 11. And just as a father, there's things I used to do with them, whether it be because my energy's low and my energy level is not like it used to be, or I just can't do some of the things I used to do. That was hard for me to accept personally, that I wasn't the same father I was than before. So,
I imagine. Did you have what were your emotions towards the guy driving the truck?
Actually, I was. I've never had any anger towards him, really. I mean, really? Yeah, it's neither. My wife hasn't. My wife said the same thing. Like we've never been angry at him. I think that it was never a proven thing that he was texting. Everybody kind of assumed that's what he was doing. So I think it was a stupid mistake he made. But I try to look at it like we all make mistakes. I mean, I've texted a Joe before, and I've not had that happen. So I mean, stuff like that happens. It was a mistake that really cost me. But I try to look at it like we all do stupid stuff. So.
Yeah, I'm sure he's been through his own version of personal hell too. Right,
exactly. I've never talked to him to see what his thoughts are, but I'm sure he's had a hard time with it too. So.
Yeah. So meanwhile, here you are. So I mean, what was the rest of the, like? What did the rest of the journey look like? Like.
Yeah. So I mean, as far as work and such. Yeah. So I got back to work after 5 months again, which is a miraculous thing. And I tried to get back to where I was before, like I said, to seeing the same amount of patients. But eventually I got close to it, but I never quite got there. When I first got back, before I had the accident, before the accident, I was working in an office, as well as going to the hospitals and seeing patients, as well as going to nursing homes. And when I first got back, all I was doing was outpatient, just the office. I never actually got back to working in a hospital. So all I was doing was outpatient. At first, I wasn't going to the nursing home, but I eventually started going to the nursing home. So I was working the normal set of hours like I used to, 4 days a week. But I never got back to seeing the same amount of patients. Like I would see close to on a normal day before, I would see close to 25 to 30 patients a day. And I would say after the accident, my average patient load was like 15 in a day. Mm-hmm. So I never got back to seeing the same amount of patients. Eventually I got back working 4 days a week, but then I had to cut back to 3 days a week. And that's when I was last practicing medicine, that's what I was working three days a week.
So when you cut back from 4 to 3, like why did you cut back? Like what was happening that told you that 4 was too many?
It was fatigue. I mean, I was still able to practice good medicine, but I could tell like with how tired I was getting at work, that the risk of me making a mistake was going up. I wasn't doing that quite yet, but I didn't want that to happen. And I was starting to have really bad headaches. I'd had headaches like pretty much since the accident, which was to be expected, but they were getting pretty severe. And I felt like the more I worked, like the more I had to think at work, and the worse the headaches got.
How did your colleagues treat you? I'm sure.
Helmet.
I'm sure. Yeah, like I mean,
Right.
were they scuttlebutt that you should walk away, or it was anything like that?
No, they were awesome.
Amazing.
The doctors I work with were great. I mean, when I was not working, they loaned me money to pay my salary while I wasn't working, which is
Oh my God,
unbelievable. And not just the physicians, but the nursing staff and the front office staff. They were unbelievably good to me. I mean, they knew that what some of my deficits were, and they were willing to go the extra mile to make sure I could work, which was pretty awesome of them. So that as far as like the staff at the office and my medical partners, they were great. I don't think I couldn't have done it. I always tell my nurse, I always give her a hard time because I always told her she should get a raise because I know she was going above and beyond what she would do for a normal doctor. Right. I said I'm always joke to her that if you're a nurse for a doctor that has OCD, you should get an automatic raise. But she was great though. She never complained.
That's amazing. So when did you decide to walk away from being a doctor, and like what that must have been I can't even imagine how huge a decision that must have been. So that,
I always kind of assumed that based on my injury, how severe it was, that my career was going to be cut short. But I felt like I had a good handle on what I could do. Like I knew my weaknesses, and I knew what I needed to do to overcome those. So I assumed, my career would be cut short, but maybe just a few years. And I figured that when it got to be that time, that I would know it was coming and that I would be able to prepare for it. But the way it happened was happened much quicker, and it happened like more abruptly than I thought it would. So in January of 16, that's when I had to stop practicing medicine. And what led to that was, again, I was having really bad headaches, and I had this horrible migraine that I never had to go to the emergency room for one before, but I had to go to the ER for one. And even before then, I was having to call off work because of headaches. So I guess that was kind of a sign that something might be coming. So I went to the ER for this really bad migraine headache in January of 16, and a few days later, I followed up with my neurologist to kind of go over the results and talk about, the visit to the ER and all that. And he took me from the exam room into this room that had the MRIs pulled up, and he showed me, like, he goes, "Here's your old MRI. Here's your MRI from when you had the accident. Here's your MRI from 2 days ago." And he was showing me this is evidence that your brain is actually shrinking. So you have all this scar tissue in your brain, and like you have in this first MRI, you see all this healthy brain tissue, and the second MRI, you see all this like kind of dead space where there used to be healthy brain tissue. Now there's nothing. So he said your brain, from all the effort you're putting in, and your brain is actually shrinking. And he goes, because of this, I know you're not making mistakes yet, but I see this as a possibility in the near future, and I want you to stop. I think you need to stop practicing medicine. So I'm like, okay, that's whatever. When do you think I should stop? Thinking he'll be like, work like another month or two or so. And he goes, no, you need to stop now. So I went from basically practicing medicine on one day to going back and to the office next day saying, hey, I'm done practicing. I'm done. I'm finished. So that was hard. That was one of the toughest. Man, I've had a lot of like hard conversations with people, but I remember going back to the office and having a we had like a meeting with the office staff and going up in front of them and telling them like I had to quit. And that was a tough meeting.
Like, what do you mean by tough? Like, what happened? Like, did you?
Oh, yeah.
Because
I think I was.
Give me the deets.
I think I'm out. Before this accident happened, I wouldn't say I was like an emotional person, but I wasn't afraid to cry and show my emotion. But like after the accident, I want to cry sometimes, but I have a hard time like showing my emotions. I get like almost more angry than anything. Not angry like I want to punch somebody, just kind of like just angry, internally angry, I guess. Mm-hmm. But I can't cry. But I remember that meeting when like I lost it. It was hard. Like I was having a hard time getting the words out, and I was crying a lot. So, I think at some I went off and on there for a while, thinking like, if I would have done things differently, if I'd have tried a little harder or worked a little harder, I could have made this last longer. I wouldn't have to retire. So I was almost a little embarrassed with myself at one point. At some points, I was thinking, if I would have done, maybe I could have lasted longer if I'd have worked harder or did things differently. So, I think I eventually came to the conclusion that, I think I did all I could do. But, I guess again with the being growing up thinking like work hard and you'll get what you want, you'll be able to achieve what you want. When that couldn't happen, I felt like I kind of messed up.
So, I mean, as you're going through this with your wife, I mean, I know, how did you guys deal with or how did she deal? Maybe is a better way to question it, with her own grief and her own stress and her own frustration. Because I know with me and my first wife was it dealt with severe mental health issues, and I mean, holy God, man! Like, I mean, it was.
Yeah.
I mean, there was days I was strong, and there was days I was absolutely not. And so, how did she? I mean, and the entire change in the future that you had imagined, right? I mean,
and my wife's she's amazing. I mean, I think a lot of people were so impressed with how she responded during the month I was in the hospital, and how she's responded to all this. Like the follow up to all this, I mean, she's been very strong, and she's been able to hold things together. So, people ask her all the time, like, how did you do it? Like, what was your key? And me and my wife both have pretty strong faith, and she always tells people that talks in the Bible about when tough times happen, God give you a peace that's beyond all understanding. So she always, that's kind of that's who she attributes it to. She doesn't attribute it to anything that she done or herself. She attributes it to her faith in God, and He was the one that kind of carried her through it all. But that being said, I mean, it's not been easy. I mean, I've written this book, and I always tell her, like, you need to write a book because, you have a story to tell. Essentially, you're married. You've been married to two different guys. Like, who I was before the accident is completely different than who I am now. I mean, and the fact that she hasn't given up on me, and she's stuck by me through it all. And there's times that a lot of times she's carried me through it all. So, she's the one who needs to write a book.
Yeah, no kidding. So just so you know, there's still a bunch of banging going on somewhere in that room. Maybe it's coming from inside my own head. That's definitely a possibility. There's nobody
else in this room unless it's me, like hitting the. Maybe it's. I don't know. I'll try not to move so much. I mean, I'm moving too much.
Anyways, so so then you have this, abrupt end to your career. So what happens to you next? Like what do you do for money? Like, how does that work?
Money from a financial standpoint, we have been extremely blessed throughout this whole thing. Like I told you before, my even when I wasn't working and I wasn't getting a salary, my boss agreed to just loan me the money until I was back to working. When I first started working, I met with a financial advisor, to kind of get things in line. This was way back when. Okay, it's like 2006, and he said you should buy disability insurance. And I'm thinking, I don't need disability insurance, but as a doctor, what's going to happen? But he talked us into it, and we paid on that for years, thinking like paying this check every month, saying like this is a waste of money. It wasn't cheap.
Yeah.
And lo and behold, I needed disability insurance. So when I was back working, for a while there, towards the end of my career, I was working part-time. So I started collecting partial disability then. So that kind of, that was able to make up for the lost pay as a part-time doctor. And then when I no longer could work, that got converted to full-time disability. So, that was a good thing that we kept paying that check every month.
Yeah, no kidding. Holy crap. So you now, I mean, you're facing the future, and I'm sure going WTF, man, like what the fuck do I do now? Like,
that's exactly right.
What's that like?
I mean, I had my whole life I had envisioned like, okay, I'm going to be a doctor. I'm going to work until I'm 60 or so and retire and move to Florida and live in a beach house or something like that. I don't know. So I had this whole plan in my head, what's going to happen. And, I was 30, how old was it? 35. Nope. I was, when I couldn't work anymore. Let me think. Maybe 39 is when, either 30 or 39 was when I couldn't work anymore. That's when I had to retire. So now I have this whole life ahead of me. And, I can't be a doctor anymore. My neurologist said, like, you can't do this anymore. But I still felt like I had something in me. I still felt like I could do something. But I had no idea what that was going to be. I really didn't.
Oh, let me ask you one question. So when he told you that, you looked at this MRI and he told you that you had to stop being a doctor, like, did he also say you need to live your life in a different way to prevent any further damage to your brain? Like, was there much more stringent criteria on it, or?
Not exactly. I don't remember him saying that like that. I mean, it was just
okay.
I think it was a matter of just making sure I get my rest and make sure I don't overexert my, my brain, I guess. I mean, you think about, I guess if you look at it the way of like somebody injures their leg or something, they're supposed to take it easy so the leg can heal and they can start using it again. But with the brain, it never like totally heals. So you have to kind of be cautious with it the rest of your life.
So is it still shrinking? Like, is that same thing still happening?
I had an MRI done recently, and it hadn't changed much. So
okay, cool.
That's kind of stabilized. I mean, I had this. I think it was my neurologist that had this report made, and he was talking about the brain shrinking and all that stuff, and it was written down that it's in my medical chart basically that based on my injuries. And based on what my MRI looks like, the expert opinion says that I have about 5 to 10 years left of where my brain is functioning fairly well, and after that, it's going to start declining rather quickly. Again, the doctors also can't believe I'm doing as well as I am, so you can only put so much weight in those reports. But as of now, it's been almost 6 years. So I'm in the 5 to 10 year mark, and I haven't noticed any major changes recently. And I'm just gonna keep the hope alive that it's not gonna happen and live my life like. I'll say this, I guess. I'm going to keep the faith and hope alive that it's not gonna happen, but I'm also not gonna take any chances.
Right.
If that makes sense.
Yeah, totally. God,
that's what I tell people with this. Yeah, that's what I've been telling people. Like, I know it feels like sometimes I'm in a hurry to get all these things done, and people are like, well, slow down, buddy. But I'm thinking like, you know what? I'm not sure. I know I got to I got to take care of my body and take it easy and get my rest and stuff. But also, I don't want to take any chances and miss out on opportunities to do what I want to do.
Do you find that sort of to be a hard thing to balance? Because I could see you would feel immense pressure, but you also, the thing you need to do no kidding.
Try to find the balance of, knowing that I need to rest, but also feeling the pressure like I got to get this done because I'm not sure how much longer I can do this. So it's trying to find the balance of those two. And I think I go back and forth where I feel like I have a good balance, and other times I'm almost like manic and trying to get everything done and can't sleep at night because I have to worry about my mind won't stop thinking about what I want to do. And then I have other times where I'm just too tired to think at all.
Is is there a sense of focus and some sort of clarity or something that comes from knowing that your time might be more limited than it would have been if you lived a totally normal life?
Oh, yeah, I think so. I mean, I'm not sure if it's the case with all people, but for me, it's been. I mean, I think you just when something like this happens, and there's a chance that it could come to an end rather soon. You have a different perspective on everything. I mean, perspective is a word that I've used a lot over the last few years. Your perspective on things change, like things that you realize like what's important and what's not important, and you decide what those are, and you focus on the things that are important, and the things that aren't important, you're like, I'm not going to worry about that right now. And the same, and not only that, but I think just the fact that my energy is so much less than it used to be, and I have so much less reserve. I have to be very picky about what I'm going to focus on.
Mm-hmm.
If that makes any sense.
Yeah, very much so.
If I spread myself too thin, then I don't feel like I do it. I don't feel like I do anything very well. But if I can actually focus on a couple things at a time, then that seems to work much better for me.
I mean, now that you've had some time and space and you're into living a different life, I mean, are you able to see any gifts that this experience has given you?
I think so. I think there definitely has been. I mean, I think that I don't know how to explain this best, but I think before I was always worried about making sure everybody liked me, or making sure that a little bit of a people pleaser.
Mm-hmm.
I think there's actually some there's such an advantage when you figure out, like, what, not everybody's gonna like you, and you can't please everybody, and you gotta kind of pick and choose, and not worry about the people, not worry when you kind of go with your heart and what's on your heart, and then people are either gonna accept you or not accept you.
Mm-hmm.
I will say, I think this too. I guess this kind of goes along with your question. I wrote a blog post about this at one point, way back, and it was all about the idea of giving up, and how before people say, like, don't never give up, don't give up, which I agree with that. There are certain things you don't give up on, but eventually, at one point, when I was working so hard to get back to who I was before, and I was trying to make sure I was who I was, trying to give other people who I was before, show them that I hadn't changed much. That was just so tiring for me. But when I finally gave up on that, that's when I started that's when I started being more successful as this new person. When I finally gave up on who I used to be and was more accepting who I am now. It was more of like a self-acceptance. I'm not sure.
And so what type?
I'm not sure.
No,
if I'm making sense or not, but
no, you're making total sense. And I think there's a lot of people that could actually benefit from this topic, because I think so many of us have a hard time giving up on the person we think we're supposed to be.
Exactly right.
And just fucking being the person we actually are. Right. So how did you come to terms with that? Like, what kind of work did you do to get to that place?
I think, I don't know if I did much work that involved that, but I think that a lot of it's based on my how can I word this? My ask it again. No, can you answer that question again?
Yeah, the question was, so like, how did you get to the point of accepting, like letting go of who you used to be and and just accepting that you are a different person
Right.
now?
I think it was a matter of realizing like, okay, there are some things that there were some things about the old person that I was that I miss having, but and I was having a hard time seeing the good things in this new person. And so when I was able to switch my perspective on, okay, I may have lost all these things, but look at all these things that I've gained. Whenever I was able to start thinking more about what I'd gained instead of what I'd lost, I think that changed a lot for me. It almost reminds me of a so I wrote this other blog post a while back. So this guy, this is a good friend of mine. He was an old basketball coach. He's actually the guy that introduced me and my wife. He came to see me in the hospital, and I remember him talking to him soon after I got out of the hospital. And he said that when he came to see me, he felt like he was like, there's a lot of people there visiting me and stuff. He said he felt like he was watching my funeral because all these people were there, and it's just sort of, he said that he just almost had a feeling like he was coming to watch. He was like watching my funeral there, which I thought was kind of a odd thing. But I started thinking about that, and I think it was in an essence, it was almost, maybe it was a funeral, because this old me, I didn't physically die, but this old person that I was kind of almost died, and then eventually this new person, came to life. So I think when I keep that sort of perspective about, I may have lost all these things, and this old person is gone, but I have this new person now, and there's some pretty. One thing, I'm lucky this new person. I'm lucky to be alive, and two, I'm lucky that I'm able to function as this new person, and I have some strengths now that I didn't have before.
Yeah, it must have been such an amazingly complicated journey of like discovering this new you, right?
Yeah, and I think that there's still times where there's still times I'm trying to figure out who I am, and there's things about that I'm confused by, like, okay, that's weird that I'm thinking that, or weird that I'm doing that now. Why is that? So it's still, I think I'll probably go on the rest of my life trying to figure out who this.
Well, shit, I do that too. So I guess you're
right.
perfectly
That's
normal.
right.
Jeez, I guess that we're all on the.
We all do
sort
it.
Of
we all do it.
Yeah,
we all do it.
No kidding.
Yeah.
So what are you doing now, man?
Yeah, so man, what I'm doing now is completely crazy compared to who I used to be and what I thought I'd be doing at this point. So, when I couldn't, going back to when I couldn't work anymore, and you said, what are you going to do now? Like, I wasn't sure what I was going to do, but I knew I had all this free time, and I didn't, again, from a financial standpoint, I didn't need to go out and seek a new job right away. Like, I could just take it easy and try to just occupy my time and keep my mind occupied and keep busy. So, I had all these things. I was really struggling this time. Like, I had all these things in my mind, like, that I wanted to tell people. I wanted to explain, like, I wanted to tell people my story, like, about I had this near fatal accident I shouldn't have survived, and I did. And then I wasn't expected to really have much function left, and was functioning much better than I thought I was. And like a couple years after my accident, I had this like spiritual awakening where like God just started changing my heart and like showing me things. Like, I'd been a Christian my whole life, but there was a time where I went to this conference with my wife, and I was just going I wasn't going to learn anything. I was just going to get away. And but man, God just changed my heart at this conference, and so I just started learning all these things about how my faith from before was like, it was pretty messed up. Like, there were things that I thought were really important that really weren't that important, and there were things that I thought weren't important. They actually were important, if that makes sense. So I wanted to like tell people all these things. So what I tried to do was, like, I would just try to tell people, like, I would talk to them If they want to hear my story, I would tell them. But I'd have had such a hard time explaining myself. Like I said before, I have such a hard time sometimes thinking of what words I want to say to explain my story or to explain what's on my mind or my heart. And so I decided instead of I couldn't tell them verbally, I would start I would start a journal up, which is crazy for me because I was not the journaling type. Like I wasn't into that thing. That seemed weird to me. If you asked me before about that, I was like, that's weird. I'm not going to do that. But
hey, so let me ask you a quick question. So you mentioned, you had a hard time explaining it, and isn't it? I'm sure you've found, or I suspect you found, just like I have, that ability to, tell your story in a way that connects you with your past and who you are, and that also connects people. That's
right.
just a skill that needs to be practiced.
Yeah, it really is. It really is. So yeah, I think you're exactly right. Because if you'd asked me just a couple years ago, would you ever be able to tell your story? I'd be like, no, I can write it down, but I don't think I'll ever be able to verbally tell it. But I found the more I talk to people about it, it's gotten easier for me to do. So, but for the time, I couldn't do it. So I'm just going to like journal. I'm gonna make a journal and do that. I'm gonna like, so I'd go to the library and I'd journal all these things, and actually shared this journal with one of my friends or a couple of my friends, and they said, you know what, you should share this stuff with other people. Have you ever starting a blog up? And I was like, I've heard of a blog, but I don't really know what that is. So actually, so I looked into it, like, maybe I should do that. So I just started. I hadn't released the blog yet, but I just started like writing blog posts, and that was really good for me to get that stuff out that way. With it, I felt like I needed to tell people this stuff, but I couldn't tell them. I felt like I couldn't do it justice by verbally, but I felt like by writing it out, it was a much better way for me to do that, and so that's what I ended up doing. I mean. I just wrote stuff for months. I just wrote stuff down, and in the summer. So again, I stopped working in January of 16, and in the summer of 16 is when I kind of launched this blog, and I got help from a guy down here in Franklin. He has since moved back to California, but a guy named Jared Wilson had a blog that I read, and he helped me kind of get this blog going, and I started that up. That was in the summer of 16, and then since that time, in the late summer of 16, we came down here to. Let's go back, I guess. So in December of 15, so this is a month before I had to stop working. So we came on vacation in Nashville. Me, my wife, and kids just kind of get away. We stayed here like a couple weeks or so, and we didn't say it to each other at the time, but we both had this feeling like we could live down here. We really loved it down here, and we thought we could live here one day. But I was still working, and we were happy in Northwest Indiana. We thought that's where we're gonna live. But then when the next month happened, when I was forced to retire, that kind of opened up doors for us. We started thinking, okay, maybe we need to move. Maybe we need to go somewhere and get this fresh start. Because I had this in my head. I'm thinking, working in this small town, and everybody knows me as a doctor. That's kind of my identity. And then when suddenly that's not the case anymore, it was kind of hard for me to go on living there.
No kidding.
You know what I mean? And then, so I'm not a doctor. What am I going to be now? I'm going to be a blogger. So how am I going to explain that to people? They're going to think, this guy's, what's wrong with this dude? So with all that taking place, we thought, maybe it's time for a new start. So we came down to again, we were looking at Nashville initially. And my wife decided that I don't want to live in the city. Let's look around Nashville. So we found Franklin, and we came down to visit in right before school started in the summer of 16, and we fell in love with it down here, and we decided we're going to give it a shot. So we moved down here a few weeks later. And we lived here since then.
Wow. And so you've written a book?
Mm-hmm. So yeah, and that's another. If you told me I was going to write a book again, it's almost as crazy as me doing a blog. But both of them are crazy. But so I started this blog up, and people seem to like it. And it was I don't know what makes a blog successful. Maybe I know there's real blogs that are crazy successful. I don't think mine's like that, but the people that read it seem to enjoy it. And some people read some of my blog posts, and they suggested like you should write a book. I mean, I think there's enough for you. You should put this into a book form. And again, I told you before, like the one of the reasons I decided to do it I decided to do it now instead of waiting was the fact that there's this report out there that says like, based on my injuries, they're not sure much longer I'll be able to do this. So I decided, I'm gonna go ahead and do it now. And so I put together this book proposal and shipped it out to a few publishers, and lo and behold, a publisher was interested in it, and I signed a book deal. So that was about a year and a half ago. Well, over a year ago or so. I signed this book deal, and just finished the book up, actually.
Wow. So, and is it is it your story, or is there your story plus?
Yeah, it really is. I mean, people ask me, it's called Finding Normal, an uninvited change and unexpected outcome. And people ask me all the time, like, you should write another book. I'm like, well, I only have one story right now, so yeah. This is all you're getting for a while. Then that's when I tell people, like, my wife needs to write the next book. So
yeah, no kidding.
The pressure's on her.
Isn't it? I wrote a book too, and for me, it was so
cool.
It was so interesting to. Like another thing that I think was powerful, one thing that was really powerful for me, I guess two main things I think was, number one, when I finished the book and like wrote the last word, I was like, I don't even care what happens after this, because I proved to myself that I can take on a project of this magnitude and finish it.
Yeah.
But I think, and the other thing was, I mean, obviously when you spend that much time thinking about something, you get a tremendous amount of insight about it, right? So did you find that too?
Oh yeah. Yeah, as I wrote, I was like, I'd write something down, like, man, I never really knew I thought that, but I guess I do.
Yeah.
I mean, you kind of learn more as you write. You learn more about yourself, and I don't know if you had this, like this. Actually, just this week, this happened. So, my book is actually almost got like two, like launch periods, I guess you could say. Mm-hmm. So this first launch is this. I'm just having I'm still on my website right now. It's not for sale in stores yet. So for the first few months, I have a bunch of copies here at the house, and I'm selling those. And then later on this year in November, that's when it goes up. You can pre-order it at other websites like Barnes & Noble, Amazon. You can pre-order it, but it doesn't go out. Mm-hmm. It doesn't become available to buy from them until November. So I hadn't read like the actual book, like the physical book until this week, and I read it earlier this week. And I'm not sure if I've talked to some other authors, and they told me this is not unusual. But when I read the book this week, I was thinking like, this book is not very good.
Well, you know,
I don't know.
So I kind of had the opposite thing. I was like, when I wrote the book, I'm like, this is fucking garbage, this entire thing. And then I got the book and I was like, I actually sound like I might know what I'm talking about. But
yeah. See, I had the opposite. When I was writing it, like, I would read lines to my wife, like, listen to this line, Jackie. And she'd be like, she would like, calm down. It's not that, like, it's good, but you're getting too big of a head.
Listen to this line, Jackie.
Yeah, listen how good this is. She's like, oh, you're getting too big of a head there. But anyway, when I read it this week, I was like, this isn't as good as I thought. And so I was like whining to my wife about, like, Jackie, this book stinks. Like, be quiet. The book's fine. Yeah. But I mean, it's funny because as soon as I said that, like, I've had so much positive feedback from people this week that have read it. So it's like they knew I needed to hear it. Then I was like, Jackie, like, what else would they say, Jackie? What else they want to say? They're going to tell your books. They're not going to tell me my books stink. She's like, be quiet.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. These are all the thoughts. These are all the thoughts that go through your head when you're putting yourself like way outside your comfort zone, right?
Right.
I mean, I think this is the kind of stuff that scares people from actually stepping outside their comfort zone. Because man, it can be a friggin' emotional roller coaster.
Right. Yeah. What if people? Yeah. What are you gonna do if people read it? They're like, don't respond, or they don't.
Yeah.
I have that happen. Again, I don't. I've gotten lots of positive feedback from the book, but I always tell Jackie, like, yeah, what are they going to tell you? Tell me my books? They're not going to say that.
Yeah.
Maybe they would. Maybe some would. I don't know. But I've noticed this with my when I was a doctor, it was I would get almost immediate feedback. So if I prescribed a medicine and they got better, I would know right away, like, oh yeah, they're happy with me. I made them better. So I know right away that I did a good job. But with this writing and blogging and writing the book, you don't always get that. Like you write it and you get it out there, but you don't always hear back from the person that read it. They're not going to tell you, like, yeah, I really like that, or you may hear nothing. And so I think my automatic response to nothing is like, oh, they didn't like that. They must think it stinks, which is not the case. But my automatic response when somebody doesn't respond to a blog post I've written or doesn't respond to the book, they think, oh, they don't like it. And I've noticed in regards to my blog, like, I've not been writing too much on it lately because I've been focused on my book. But I've had a few blog posts where I've like spent a week or two to get this thing ironed down and perfect, and like, this is gonna be a good one. Like, people are gonna love this. This one's gonna go viral.
Yeah.
So I put it out there and like nothing. It's at crickets, no response at all. Like, oh, I guess it stunk. And then I'll have one that I'll have an idea one night, and I'll write one like in an hour, and I'll put it out there, and people love it. I'm like, what the heck? I spent 2 hours on this last one, and nobody responded at all. And this one I wrote tonight in an hour, people love it. Like, what the heck?
That's interesting. They probably feel like the one that you just poured out is more real.
Yes, somehow. Exactly. Exactly. I think people. Yeah, I think that's what it is.
Wow, that's amazing, man. So your book goes live or released in November. So that's exciting.
Right.
So
right. Yeah.
Anything else on the horizon?
Yeah. As of now, I mean, you can buy it now on my website, but it will be out in stores and on other like online retailers in November. Yeah.
That's amazing, man. So if people want to find out more about what you're doing, what's the best way for them to do that?
I would just say go to my website's jeffhuxford.com, jeffhuxford.com. And if you want to learn more about the book, there's a page on the book called the bookstore. You just click on there and you'll find out more about the book, and you can order a copy if you want one. And there's also a spot on that page too where you can, if you just want to wait and order it from Amazon or Barnes & Noble or Books A Million, you can pre-order it now too as well. Wonderful.
Well, we'll include the links to all that stuff in the show notes pages. Is there anything we didn't cover that you wanted to touch on?
Well, you're asking like what's next. I think that I'm hoping to do some more speaking here in the near future. Mm-hmm. I've reached out to a publicist here in Franklin that is going to help me with like getting the word out about my book. So I think when that happens, there'll be more opportunities for me to speak. And so, yeah.
Amazing.
Yes.
Well, listen, man, thank you. I mean, I love this conversation. I got a lot of insight in some areas I had no idea about, which is one of the reasons I love doing this podcast. So if I could
appreciate it. I mean, it's an awesome thing you're doing here.
Yeah, thanks. You should maybe think about starting a podcast, man. It's such a cool way to talk to amazing people.
Something to consider for sure.
Yeah, cool. Well, listen, man, thanks so much for being a guest on the Mental Health Warrior show. And man, I wish you all the best. And like I said, I'll put the links to all your stuff, books, website in the show notes page. And thank you again.
I appreciate it. Thanks a lot.
Okay.
How you doing?
Bye. Amazeballs. Thank you very much, Jeff, for the conversation and the education and the insight and the fellowship. Great. I can't even comprehend what you've been through, brother, but your fighting spirit and your perseverance and your persistence is inspiring. And yeah, amazing. I often wonder what I would do when confronted with similar or a situation of, similar magnitude, I would guess. Now I'm going to end this episode like I end every episode, and that's by saying, if you've struggled, I want you to know that I have never struggled, and you're fucked up for struggling, and I'm totally judging the shit out of you. No, wait a minute. That's not how I end these episodes. That's crazy talk. How I end these episodes is by saying, hey, fucker, if you've struggled, I want you to know that I've struggled too. And if you ever want to talk to me, I'm a safe fucking place, and I will definitely not judge you, okay? So please give that gift to somebody else, and all it really takes is you being a little bit more open about you and being a lot less judgmental about others. Love yourself, love others, and create a place and space of safety where we can all just fucking be ourselves. Because, man, it is a hell of a lot more fun, and the connection we feel is a hell of a lot deeper when we're just walking through the world, doing our very best to be our real selves. Okay, so I hope you enjoyed the episode, and we will see you at the next one. And maybe I'll have some other cool story about how I had to sneak through the basement or around my kids to set up my little mobile recording studio, maybe in the backyard. Actually, maybe I will do it in the backyard next time because it is so beautiful out and the birds are chirping. And I think today is the day where spring has finally sprung. April 21st, 2018. All right, guys, have a great day. And I hope you, again, thank you for listening. Hope you enjoyed the episode, and we will continue to produce more awesome episodes. So I can learn, you can learn, and we can all be fucking awesome together.